So I am going to share with you the proposition that the Failing, Dreaming and Doing working group worked on. And the proposition is co-authored. So everyone sent in their reflections and we kind of put this together. And so we wanted to present everyone's reflections and voices in this proposition. And it comes out of quite a generative set of conversations yesterday. And so I will just read from this proposition that we've all put together. So I'd like to thank everyone who was involved in the conversations yesterday for all of your contributions. Yesterday we gathered, a group of many walks, many lives, to share failures, dreams, and actions, to compare notes, to contribute strategies, to collectively hold grief. We sought to explore what it means to reimagine land outside of the notion of it as property, and to seriously think through models and examples of work from our own experiences, from organizing, from our contexts, from our own practices, to redefine our relationships to the land. We shared that in the spaces of strategies for land justice, failing, dreaming, and doing are not mutually exclusive. It is from failure that we dream and do. Any contemporary spirit of militancy and abolition necessitates an acknowledgement of the impossibility. It may sound paradoxical to advocate for doing while acknowledging impossibility. But failure is a part of doing and dreaming. There is no separation. The greatest failure, in fact, is alienation from the land, a once existing relation that has been violently enraptured through colonialism, apartheid, and genocide, and from which further violence follows in power and in labor. Across the earth, because of this, that alienation becomes a kind of death, for the failure of alienation continues. It is a perpetual cycle. Our response must be a continuous rehearsal, a perpetual cycle of resistance, a commitment always to respond to failure with dreaming and with doing. We must continuously seek out, ask how to make life in proximity to death. How do we repay ourselves even without the prospect of the law enabling justice, and particularly despite the law? Notions of resistance and refusal are the articulation of failing while dreaming of otherwise possibilities beyond ruination, giving a horizon to a possibility of non-property and of return. We shared that abolition must include liberating ourselves from the language of the state and of property, not seeking language alternatives, but rather liberating ourselves from the current grammar of colonialism, capitalism, and the state. For a commitment to land justice, to redefine and to imagine and to dream otherwise, we must use different languages. For the language we have been given and is imposed upon us is a language that structures alienation and violence. We must ask ourselves, when does earth become land? And when does land become property? Similarly, in the context of the commodification of land, when do human beings become labor? What are the languages that enable our land struggles? What life worlds are enabled through a liberated approach to how we make meaning? The word place in Arabic language is related to a constellation of other meanings, derivatives that mean to remain, species, capabilities, masteries, to be, and universe. Even beyond words, what other forms of language are available to us in action or in the body? Can we map the land based on how it carries the body of human sound cast within the landscape, affiliating ourselves and our kin by our association with particular animals and landscapes in names and totems? An intimacy with the land, naming the more than human based on our relationships with the land. Can land be understood in an expansive sense, as a verb, as a web of relations, and an act of making place, rather than as an object with which to have a relation of ownership, domination, and exploitation. We shared that a reimagination of language also enables a reclaiming of belonging to and with the land. The concept of right in Arabic is haq, which is right in legal terms, but also justice and truth. And yet justice and truth are not strictly answerable through the law, but rather through struggle for truth and justice as a way of life. The struggle to a right to life and a right to land, both of which are central to the Palestinian liberation, exceed the limits of the law. Land law, as discussed through many examples in our conversation, legislate precarity. It is in conflict with life. We must redefine our relationships with land outside of notions of the law, and therefore inherently outside of property. We thought together beyond land as property, a thing, a noun, and rather about landedness, a verb, landedness as opposed to being landless, which implies having land and being rooted, having landed. We spoke of land workers reclaiming belonging to the land through placemaking, disrupting labor relations through landowners, and still others using language and orality, dance, song, embodied ritual, as bringing into being legal orders of relating to land, waters, non-human life worlds that displace private property. Landedness as being or becoming with the land, not feeling you are outside of it, engaging the land in a manner that does not privilege the eye or vision, that is an ocular-centric relation of looking at. Rather, landedness is an oral and embodied relation to the land. Again, this embodiedness goes beyond existing paradigms of colonial commodifying language. We shared that land justice is always solidarity with others and solidarity with other places, thinking with other places and life worlds in the way we dream and do. For land alienation, the stories of how we have arrived here and how it works in different places in the world is somehow very similar, and we might learn from each other's failures, from each other's dream and ways of doing. There are many different ways of doing, of enacting abolitionist ideas. When we understand each other's stories, we also understand an important reality. Return is not the reversal of leaving or expulsion, but we have to understand that the returnee has also been changed by the processes of capitalism and alienation from the land. We must also understand the extent of our loss and alienation from the land. To understand our relationship with land as belonging and as being is also to understand the severity of the loss and the effort that will be required to reconnect with the land and to begin to undo alienation. What is to be done with the changes in us? We shared that a fundamental site of resistance is an everyday practice. Just doing is resistance. For many, land justice is about insisting on being there, belonging and being present. And this insistence is resistance. We learned of Aunt Aziza, the matriarch of a family who places ongoing threat and violence over her land and culture in Palestine, and who shares and teaches, handing over knowledges to younger family members through oral traditions. A space for both material and spiritual nourishment, producing our own food, eating together, walking together, thinking together, laughing together as everyday practices on the land. Aunt Aziza reminds us that resistance is present in creating spaces where freedom is lived and not imagined. We learned of bearing umbilical cords as a symbol of belonging to the land, and as an assertion of returning to that land to join one's ancestors through burial. We shared that land, earth, acts as a protagonist carrying the past and future lives of the disappeared. Earth is a carrier to the ghost dwelling in the landscape, a carrier of the exiled and the rehearsal of return, but importantly, who live here don't regard the death of people as the end of life. Tina Sizwe.